here's our video on opposites and absolute value. There's a lot of similarities between opposites and absolute values, but then there's some differences, so you got to pay attention to those. First of all, an integer is a set of numbers that include whole numbers. They're opposites and 0. Opposites are two numbers that are the same distance from 0, but in opposite directions. For example, a -5 and a +5. They're both 5 units away from 0, but one is in positives, one is in the negatives. Okay, and then I have an example of what is represented by opposites, or how to see opposites. You can see that we have a minus sign right here, and that negative sign right there actually represents the opposite. So this would be the opposite of 5 is -5. And the second example, I'd have the opposite of -7 is equal to 7. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0. So it does not matter what direction it goes, it's just how far away it is from 0. And for absolute value, you can see that we use these little bars that we put around the number, and that is a mathematical symbol for absolute value. So in this first one, we'd have -8. The absolute value of -8 is 8. And in the second one, we'd have the absolute value of 6 is 6. Notice that they're both positive answers because they're both the distance away from 0. They're both, -8 is 8 units from 0, and 6 is 6 units from 0. Okay, I'm going to move on to our first example here. Okay, we're going to talk about finding the opposite and absolute value. So the first thing I want to do is plot -7. So I have to find -7 on here. So -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. I'm going to put it right there, and I'm going to label it so I know what it is. Now, the opposite is, I want to know what number is the same distance away from 0, but in the opposite direction. So I am 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units away from the left. So starting from 0, I'm going to go 7 units to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to plot my point, and when I count it up, that is 7. So the opposite is 7. Okay. Now let's talk about what is the absolute value. The absolute value is how far away -7 is from 0. So I look, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units away from 0. So the absolute value is also 7 because it's 7 units away from 0. Okay, if you need to pause, go ahead. Make sure that you wrote down the -7 in your blank. I'm going to move on to the next example. In our next example, okay, we have the same thing. We're going to plot 3 this time. So this time I'm going to plot 3. So I put my point here, and I put the 3 above it. Okay, now I want to find the opposite of 3. So I want to go the same number units away from 0, but in the other direction. 1, 2, 3 to the right. So for my opposite, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 to the left. That's going to take me to -3. So the opposite is -3. Okay, for absolute value, I want to look at, see how many units away from 0 it is. So for absolute value, it's 1, 2, 3 units away from 0. So my answer is 3 because it's 3 units away from 0. So that's how you do the opposite, and then that's how you do absolute value. Okay, let's move on to the next example. Pause if you need to. In example 3, instead of using a number line, I'm just going to ask you to state the opposites and the absolute value. So in example 3, find the opposite. What's the opposite of 23? Well, if 23 is a positive 23, so it's 23 units in the positive side, then I'm going to go 23 units in the negative side, so my answer would be -23. For B, if my opposite of -37 is 37 units to the left, then I would go 37 units to the right, which would take me to positive, so that would be +37. Okay, again, make sure you write your numbers in the blanks. For example 4, we're going to state the absolute value. How far away from 0 are these numbers? 78 is 78 units away from 0. So it'd still be 78. And for -62, it is 62 units to the left, which means it's 62 units away from 0. So it's 62. Notice how sometimes in opposites and absolute value can kind of have similar rules, but sometimes they have different rules, so pay attention. Opposites, got to think of opposite directions. One positive, one negative. Absolute value, distance away from 0. Okay, if you need to rewatch anything, go ahead. Otherwise, have a great day.